Good evening, Brendan Corrigan.
I was waiting for the good morning, good afternoon, and all that to all our viewers across the world, from Wellington to Wisconsin, if that makes any sense. But yes, how are you, Mr. Pritchard? How are things down kind of Tesquite? I always forget exactly what you call your neck of the woods.
Sucre is the barrio, but Chapinero, we're in Chapinero just. And a little tiny finger of Chapinero just touching the park.
Okay. All normal down there? Anything wild or exciting?
No, nothing going on. It's the normal stuff. The indigenous campment is growing. Gosh knows where that's going to end up. But for now, it's growing every day. All a bit weird. And of course, news in Bogotá is pretty much up in the air, as we both know.
Yeah, but what? So the park or the encampment there, whatever, it's taking over more of the Parque Nacional.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the borders are moving up. Yeah.
Right. Interesting. And there doesn't seem to be much pushback for the moment.
To put it in a better way, actually, it's not really that the borders are expanding, but just the edges that were kind of unoccupied are now being occupied.
And what's the whole... I know we talked about this a few weeks ago, and people can check back on previous shows, but the whole idea here is that they're in protest against what exactly?
They're not in protesting against anything. They just don't have anywhere to live.
Okay. Well, so technically, but were they not kicked off their lands?
Yes. Well, I suppose they're protesting. I suppose they're not happy about it. And if you ask them, they'll protest and say, this was wrong. I mean, in that sense, they're protesting. But it's not like an organized protest. They're not symbolically... Well, maybe they are, but they're not sort of, holding banners and marching around and whatnot.
Well, yeah, but in a sense, it is a protest of sorts, like those Insulate Britain folk who
it's
glue themselves to the streets.
No, it's not really like that. It's like when you have squatter villages, like in Christiania in Denmark and things like that.
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, obviously they're doing it in a very central location, though, so they're making quite the statement.
But that's the thing. They're not. They're making a statement by their action, but they're not. There's no message that they're putting out there. There's not. So Insulate Britain have quite a clear set of aims, and they're saying very clearly, we want this to happen. If you do this, then we will stop, disrupting things, and we're going to start disrupting things in all different places, and this is why we're doing it. The indigenous people in the park are just saying, we need somewhere to live. We're going to take that place. It's very centrally located, and there's lots of wood around for us, so it's very convenient.
You may not know the answer to this, but if the government...
Critically, I suppose, another big thing is also if the police come around and brutally try to clear us out of here, people might take photos and that sort of thing, whereas in Ciudad Bolivar, we might not get away with it.
I mean, what are the chances, I probably know the answer to this myself, of the government or some agency stepping in and offering to house them, relocate them somewhere?
Look, with the best will in the world, I will say that it's possible that the mayor's office have had a word and said, here's a place, would you like to live here? And they might have said no. It's also possible that the mayor's office has said, here are some portaloos, would you like them to be put by the side of your camp? And they've said no. Those things are possible. It does look a lot, though, Brendan, like basically the mayor's office is sending down outreach workers every now and again, but when it comes to actual tangible benefits, nowhere to be seen.
Okay, final question though on this, and I know we've kind of gone off on a tangent from our running order, but where do they go to the toilet then if there are no portaloos, or are there portaloos there?
No, there aren't portaloos. I mean, you think about how many portaloos there are for an event like Rock al Parque, for example. They obviously exist in Bogotá. They could be hired or brought out of storage or whatever. These are not, we're not asking for, we know these portaloos, exist and could be used, and they're not being. So where do you think they're going to the toilet, Brendan? I mean, you're a smart man. Without wanting to be
I know where they might be. That's why I asked, are there portaloos? But they're not. I haven't been down there.
But to look, again, and not wanting to be too crude, but to be quite honest with you, Brendan, I've started saying to people who say, I'd like to come on a dog walk with you, and I kind of say, I've got to be honest, the park's just not a pleasant place to be at the moment. I mean, there's one corner of it that absolutely reeks, because it's one thing having a few homeless people using a part of the river and the sort of bank of the river as a makeshift toilet, but suddenly putting a few hundred people there, it can't take it. And
I guess some people might say as well, it's a little bit of a wake-up call and showing the reality of how some people have to live in this country, bringing it to the metropolitan.
Yes. And look, I'm not, as I've said before, I'm not blaming. I wish that the Edinburgh people weren't in the park, and I wish that they weren't doing the things they're doing. Partly it's the sanitary issues, partly it's the burning green wood, and partly it's the chopping down all the young trees up in the forest, or certainly, chopping down a lot of them. I doubt they'll ever be able to get through all of the trees, but it's going to. They're setting back the forests. They're setting back years, and but I don't blame them as such. They're in a desperate position. They've been forced into this situation. The real blame lies on an inept state that allowed their land to be taken from them and didn't offer up any consequences for those who did take it. And the secondary blame now lies with the mayor, who, frankly, just needs to find a place to put them, or at least give them reasonable conditions to live under.
Yeah, interesting. Well, anyway, as I said, often a little bit of a tangent, but guys, we welcome your comments on anything we discussed here. So do get in touch with us if you have any thoughts on that. And Ollie did mention, kind of in passing, a few themes that we are going to be touching on tonight and what we have coming up. Well, as the entertainment scene in Bogotá slowly returns to its pre-pandemic pulse, with a few significant caveats to be discussed very shortly, we're doing a little bit of event exploration on tonight's Bogotá Nights, Colombia's only live and interactive English language chat show. From lively language exchanges and top trivia nights, wherever you can find them, to what some might call enthralling expos and memorable music festivals. This alliteration isn't always easy, guys. We'll do our best to go through the wide variety of attractions on offer. What are you looking forward to attending in person again, or have the last few months even dampened your enthusiasm to get out and about? If that is the case, is there one particular event, be it a regular one that's been cancelled due to COVID, or a novel future event that you simply wouldn't miss? We can get in touch with us right now by using the live comment facility, and your messages will appear magically on screen. If you are watching this recorded, you can still get involved by commenting on where you're viewing, or via tweet, the handle being at Bogotá Post with the hashtag Bogotá Nights. Now, speaking of events, Ollie and I got back to Bogotá last night, flying, would you believe it, guys, economy class, after a few days at COP26 in Glasgow. The things we try to do and save humanity from doom. We should have Greta Thunberg on with us soon. Anyway, every now and again we do like to mix it with the ordinary folk, hence the economy class flight back. But we shall talk about COP and Colombia shortly. But first, Ollie, COVID vaccination certs are to become a reality here. What's going to be off limits for those evil unvaccinated folk? And the one doing the speaking right now may be one of those.
Pardon?
Yeah, what's off limits for those of us without the vaccine from November the 16th?
Well, pretty much.
That evil. You can still hear me, okay? Can you? I haven't gone invisible.
No, the sentence finished. I didn't think it was finishing where it was. Pretty much anything where you can expect there to be a large number of people that's not let's say, an essential event. So an essential need. So travel and transport, both within the city and travelling into city, won't be affected. You can still go to shops, including entering shopping malls. What's not really clear at the moment, Brendan, is whether places like shopping malls would be allowed to put into place their own restrictions, or whether they're blocked from putting on any further restrictions. So that's not really clear. But certainly, if it's going to be a bar, a restaurant, anything to do with entertainment, and that stretches a long way, that includes theatres, museums, etc., then yeah, you're not coming in, I'm afraid.
One thing, so this is very much from, I guess, my perspective, and we're coming at this from different angles. But it's kind of gone from get the vaccine just because to now get the vaccine, just get it. And Europe, as far as I know, the COVID certificate that they have there has kind of 3 levels to it, if I can call them that. Number 1, you have the vaccine. Number 2, you can show proof that you've recovered from COVID in the last 6 months. And number 3, another element of the certificate is a negative test. The way Colombia is going with it now is simply get the vaccine, or you can forget about entering those events that you mentioned. That's it. There's no alternative here for those who may want to go to a bar and don't have a vaccine.
Everything could be different tomorrow morning, but at the moment, it seems like what you're saying is true. But I mean, this is part of it, Brendan, is that, as we all know from living in Bogotá, the devil is very much in the details here. So there are so many questions about how it's going to work. We've had trouble already at the Bogotá Post just doing the electronic certificate. So everybody who's had a vaccine given out in Colombia under Mi Vacuna should be able to get hold of their electronic certificate. And basically the idea is that you'll be able to just scan your smartphone in pretty much straight away, that it can all be done electronically.
Okay.
I mean, that's the long-term future. This is design. Let's be honest here. This isn't necessarily about Colombia. This is partly to tie in things like, in previous weeks, we've talked about the problems of cross-recognition of vaccines between the UK and Colombia. And I think this is just part of a wider thing. If we look further down the line, it's going to be a case of transferring the system that you're using into Colombia into the United States when you arrive there, into Spain when you arrive there, whatever country you go to, you just sort of say, well, here I am registered, I'm just moving my details across from Colombia to whatever country I'm visiting, like you might for an international driving license, for example.
Yeah, I get there's a lot of. I don't want to get into all of this because it's not our remit. Neither of us are epidemiologists, and we're not experts in the field either. But there are many ways one can look at this. Like we know, for example, that immunity via the vaccine at best might have for certain people last for 6 months. So are we going to be talking now then booster? Which of course I know we get this for the flu and all that, but the flu is not compulsory. Flu jab is not compulsory for most people. Obviously, it would be advisable for those of a certain age and those with conditions. But with this COVID idea, from my side of it, as many people will know or may know, and all they need to do is go on my blog and read stories. The idea that natural immunity is just completely disregarded from this. That it's not an option. You get the vaccine or else. Now, I know you said Colombia have been quite clever with this. They're not restricting movement. You can hop on a bus and go wherever you want. You can get on a plane and fly to where you like without having to show the pass. It's just that if you want to have a social life, put it that way, of course, there are going to be people who work in the entertainment industry. If they don't have the vaccine, that would make their life much more difficult, if not impossible. So there's that side to it.
I would also imagine very, very few of those people wouldn't have had their bosses already on them. But look, I think that's quite an important part, Brendan. I mean, Colombia will be thinking about take-up here. They'll be thinking, how can we make sure that this is adhered to as best as possible? And let's be honest, what we've really got the caveats hanging over this scheme are numerous. One is, how well will this be adhered to outside of metropolitan centres? I'd imagine not much. Even in minor departmental capitals like, let's say, Mitu or Leticia, this might not be followed particularly heavily. Then there's the other action. As we said, we've got David Allen Simmons here on the comments already saying he's had trouble getting his electronic certificate. Now, this is 12 days away, Brendan. We're not talking about, something that's happening next month. This is under 2 weeks now. It's a big undertaking that Colombia's put in. And it seems to me a bit surprising that you would announce this measure on such a restricted timescale. The implementation is going to be an absolute nightmare, to say the least. And then we get into stuff like forgeries. We'll be kidding ourselves if there's not going to be immediately a big sort of line in forged documents. How well is it going to be checked? How well is it going to be enforced? All of those things.
Yeah, and in fairness, looking at it again from an unvaccinated person's perspective, like today I have pretty much freedom to do what I like. In 3 weeks' time, I would be living in a very restricted Colombia, when technically the argument could be made, well, more people are vaccinated. Now, of course, people can read data from Israel, and there have been different interpretations of that data, but there have been some people who have interpreted that data that natural immunity is more robust and lasts longer in certain people. Now, obviously, the older you are, a vaccine is far more beneficial because it's a much higher risk. The younger you are, obviously, the risks of death and even severe infection from COVID are minuscule. But so from my perspective, I'm kind of going today, I'm much freer. In about 3 weeks' time or whatever, 2 weeks' time, my movements are going to be severely curtailed. Unless I just
yours aren't, because local tiendas aren't going to start demanding stuff, but in the unlikely,
for certain things, and we're going to be talking about events in the second half of the show. There are certain things I may want to go to if I'm still in the country in December or January, and that just simply won't happen. Now, I know you'll say, well, Brendan, that's going to happen all over the world, but I mean, this has been my whole point on this particular issue from the very beginning. Particularly when we're not talking about yellow fever or something like that. But yeah, anyway, it is what it is, and we're going to see how it works out. David Allen Simmons is in that maybe Colombia needs to register people who have recovered and have natural antibodies. But you see, I do also understand, I'm not just mad anti-vax and no. I understand it's easier for the government to just get everybody a jab. It's the same way that if you're building houses, governments prefer that you have housing estates all in the one area instead of one-off houses here, there, and everywhere, because you want to get services and things into them. If you start going down different routes of, well, who has antibodies, who has better natural immunity? Personally, I'd love to know, because as I've said before, I've been intimately close with COVID and I have had absolutely nothing. The argument that by my getting the vaccine would mean that it reduces the chances of contagion, but that's simply, we do not know that yet. There is no smoking gun conclusive data that show, oh yes, getting the vaccine significantly reduces contagion. Somebody who has a natural immunity may indeed be of less of a risk of contagion. We don't know that. There's a lot of interpretation to be made of the few studies that have thus far been made. So, we're talking down the line. I guess somebody from my perspective is, if the status quo is telling me, well, everything seems fine, then why would I potentially risk a vaccination? And I know you've had it and you're fine and everything, but that is, I just want to put that perspective out there. I'd love if studies were done into somebody like me, and I may be wrong. Maybe I've just been dodging bullets left, right, and centre. Which, if I have, well, I should play the lottery because I've been a very lucky man. But Anyway, you're right, Alan Simmons, David Alan Simmons as well. I know it will happen everywhere, but that's where we are. COP26, because we could go on all day. If anybody was listening, well, I was listening to the BBC. I'm sure if you were listening to Colombian news, they probably, which would have been interesting, having Ivan Duque dubbed because he was speaking his fine American English in Glasgow. Not that the locals would understand him speaking American English, but he announced. So, what's the big deal that Colombia has taken away from this? And we had our mayor, of course, as well. They were all jet setting off to Glasgow, doing their bit to save humanity from imminent doom. Deforestation is the big thing, Ollie, isn't that it? From our perspective,
so far, I mean, look, we're only 4 days in. Comprehensive answers won't be possible for another week and a half. But yeah, look, this is a good start for Colombia, isn't it? Look, it's very easy to be cynical, and I think we all kind of have our reservations about how much how strongly anti-deforestation efforts are going to be carried out. And also, there's a bit of a danger. I always think that, are we going to have real international observers, completely impartial, to check that these deforestation measures are applied, or are we going to have a kind of situation where, it's convenient for the Western world to say, look how good Colombia is, and it's convenient for Colombia to say, look how good we are, while the reality gets a bit lost. So I can see where that might be problematic. But let's assume that things are going to happen the way that they're meant to, Brendan. If they are, this is positive. This is exactly what an organization, a meeting like COP should be coming out with. Relatively rich countries saying, here is money to relatively poor countries. Please don't do this thing that is economically beneficial, but we would like you not to do it because it hurts the environment. And we're going to give you, recompense for the money that you're missing out on. It's not unlike the Embra in the Parque Nacional, to go back to the start of the conversation.
Yeah. So this is specifically those. It's the UK that have pledged money for this.
Yeah.
Am I correct? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So your own ambassador here as well, obviously, was tweeting out.
Of course, yes.
Yeah.
All over it, of course, yes. And of course, Boris will be walking around. I'm very glad for Colombia. Very good, fantastic stuff. So yeah, no, look, I mean, this is a good start. Let's not get too carried away and proclaiming it to be, the end of everything. But it's certainly not a bad thing. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and I said, look, we can all be cynical, and I've had my run-ins this week on Facebook with certain individuals. Like somebody said to me, you have to be living in a cave to show that you're doing your bit for the environment or whatever. I just think there are so many hypocrites in this, and obviously, the optics of seeing all these private jets landing in Glasgow. You're going to go, well, did you really need to fly the private jet?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And when we talk about hypocrisy, let's not dodge the issue here. I'm not a fan of China on many levels, but let's be aware there is a certain propaganda sort of going around. And the way that China have been criticized for teleconferencing, that the Chinese premier has stayed at home and teleconferenced, I mean, it seems to be remarkable that Joe Biden escaped censure after, let's not mess around here, he flew over cars. He couldn't even just use some local Glaswegian cars. He had to bring his own cars from America on a plane so that they could drive around, whatever it is, 50-odd cars, a gigantic bloody motorcade around Glasgow. Glasgow has a perfectly well-functioning metro system. There's no reason why he couldn't have used that.
Well, the safety of the president of the free world, Ollie, is paramount.
You know what, Brendan? I'm a big believer in the argument that politicians should probably not go around, pissing people off. and then they'll be a lot safer. They won't need bodyguards. But I do realize that, that would mean a lot of people like Gustavo Petro would just be executed by death squads. But nonetheless, look, I mean, I get your point. It is hypocritical. I get your friend's point about living in a cave. I don't know if that friend was Colombian or not Colombian. It's certainly true that there's a big problem with COP here, which is it's not easy for a country like the US or like the UK or like Ireland to say, hey, you know what, Colombia? You can't do the things that we do now because it's going to be really problematic for the environment. Or even if the UK and the US and Spain and France and all those countries say, you know what, there needs to be less air travel. We're going to really restrict air travel. We're going to stop people all over the world flying. I think you've got a very fair point if you're a Colombian to say, well, it's not me that's caused this problem. I've never flown in my life, and now you're telling me that in the future I will never be able to fly. It's going to be even more expensive. It's a very unfair measure.
Yeah, 100% to that one. It's it's a kind of, well, you got to take one for the team now, guys. It's just you weren't in the right place at the right time, and why was that? Whispered colonization and stuff. Anyway, mentioning insecurity, this story will go on, and of course next week COP will be coming to its conclusion, so we might have another few big announcements in relation to Colombia and this region, so check in with us next week. But mentioning insecurity, Ollie, I'm not sure if you saw the news since we did our little show preparation, and yes, guys, we actually do try and prep this show. It may not look like it, but there was a scene from a film. That's how Caracol TV were using the headline, Noticias Caracol, of like men with machine guns in Medellin. Did you see that on the news?
No.
They were robbing a gold foundry or something outside or near Medellin. Like it was a scene from a Hollywood movie. The shoot off with men in big with machine guns and stuff like that. But there's been a few more incidents. I know we've talked about this in previous episodes as well, but El Tiempo had a headline today that officially, according to the statistics office here, DANE, that violent crime between 2018 and 2020. Now, people might say, well, 2020 is an exceptional year, but it went from about 15% down to 7%. So halved, than halved.
15% and 7% of what?
In terms of violent crime amongst the populace, I guess, reported. That's what the headline figure was. So it fell from 15% of people were involved in violent crime incidents to 7% of the populace. So more than halved. But the perception out there in Bogotá, Medellin, I think it's Bogotá, Medellin, and Cartagena, that violent crime is on the rise. Now, I'll actually be writing a story about this, hopefully publish it tomorrow or Saturday. Like we are seeing, I don't know, are we seeing more news about this, watching more news on the TV that these things are on the rise? And then tied in with that El Tiempo headline and DANE survey was that apparently 7 out of every 10 people involved in these incidents don't bother reporting them. So you've got a lot of stuff thrown in here.
Statistics like that, they're always a bit of a nightmare, aren't they? Because you're never quite sure. It's very hard to know how many people aren't doing something, usually. It's certainly, look, you'd have to be living under a rock to not have heard stories. Just using the basic eye test, it does seem like I don't feel like I've seen a massive increase in people reporting crime, but then again, people often don't necessarily go onto Facebook and Instagram going, oh my God, I got robbed yesterday. There does seem to be an up and down. I mean, look, since I've lived in Bogotá, people have always said, oh, I got robbed the other week. it does seem like everybody's saying that there's more crime, and if everybody's saying it, it might well be true. Hard to know. Violent crime has certainly gone down, over the long period in Colombia. There's no doubt about that. And homicides, of course, fall and fall and fall. I do wonder if the pandemic caused a little bit of a little bounce up. We'll see.
Yeah, and I'm going to be touching on a controversial element to that in a blog story that, as I said, I hope to publish tomorrow or Saturday, where some people are blaming a different breed of thief that has arrived into this country, and I'll say no more. Thief from the East. Anyway. Anyway, about statistics too, Ali. There are lies, damned lies, and statistics, as the saying goes.
Well, as they always said, 70% of statistics cited on the internet, according to Abraham Lincoln, are false.
Oh. Thanks for that. Good man, Abe. He was ahead of his time. A man who might be coming back into the fold, James Rodriguez.
James Rodriguez, yeah.
Now going from Abraham Lincoln to James Rodriguez. What a segue there. He's back in the La Selección for the big games next week. This day next week, we will, I guess, be coming near the end.
Big question. I suppose the huge question now is he in the squad or is he in the team? And we're not going to know that.
I don't think he'd start. I think it might be ease him in. Like, oh, come on, what's he done? Playing for that team that I can never remember their name in Qatar. Like, come on.
He's Riyad, yeah. I mean, look, Al Riyad, I think it is. He's not at the top level anymore. Has he been called back because of an injury crisis? Notably, Muriel isn't in the squad through injury. So, hard to say. I have a sneaky suspicion he'll start at least one of the games.
Yeah, you'd imagine then it's Paraguay, isn't it? Brazil and Paraguay. They're the two games. So you'd imagine them. Well, the thing is, you see, Brazil are home and hosed, really. I know they won't want to lose at home, but they probably wouldn't mind dropping a point. So
they've got a vast pool of players. I mean, they might just sort of go, you know what? We've got a whole bunch of guys who need caps. Let's just throw some random caps about. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we'll see. As I said, we'll know next week. Mentioning though a current star, we'll see how James, if he does get game time, how he performs. But Luis Lucho Diaz scoring for Porto in the Champions League. So his star continues to rise gradually, as it may be. But he is the man, isn't he? Really, of the moment from this side.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure about gradually. He seems to have rocketed into fame, especially after the Copa America. I mean, look, he scored against Milan yesterday, which puts Milan in a very difficult position, puts Porto in a better position. It wouldn't be completely beyond the pale to imagine him coming home with a Europa League winners' medal in 5 or 6 months' time. So, you'll expect to see him playing in Spain or possibly England, maybe Italy next year.
We'll watch this space, and as I said, next week Colombia, Brazil. It'll be kind of ongoing. We'll leave the show or the second half anyway, so we'll do a live commentary run. Yeah, exactly. Anyway, I just need to want to mention the Copa Libertadores Femenina. 2 Colombian teams in action. Santa Fe had a big win against Cuenca, mentioning Paraguay, Cuenca of Asunción, 1-0 on Tuesday. And earlier today, Deportiva Cali beat Alianza Lima, by 2-0 in Cali, I believe. So good start to the 2 Colombian teams. There are 4-team groups, but I believe they only play each other once. So with both Colombian teams starting off with a win, kind of puts them in a decent position to make the knockout stages. Let's go straight into quarterfinals, I believe. Anywho, Ali, we're getting on to events. So as we mentioned at the top of the show, obviously, the middle of this month, COVID certificates, vaccine certificates will be required to get into certain things. But as we move on and as the country and Bogota opens gradually, COVID certs or not, there are going to be more and more events, we hope at least, and the city returns to its old pulse, minus the traffic. Oh, I wouldn't mind that. That can stay away.
That's coming back, I'm afraid.
Yeah, it is. It is. But your favourite event, Ollie, we might as well start off with that. And by the way, David Allen Simmons, who's kind of teaming up as our third co-presenter here for tonight. But I don't know how long you've been in the country. Have you gone to any big musical festivals here? Are there certain yearly events, annual events that you like to go to? Monthly events, weekly events? We want to hear about them. And all of these guys, do let us know, because there are certainly going to be things we'll miss. We're going to talk about what we like, events that we don't particularly like as well, things that we think you should probably avoid. But Ollie, I mean, you're a concert goer, a festival man. I'm unsurprisingly not really. But what are your kind of favorite events from a Bogota, Colombian perspective?
I probably would go with either. I mean, I'm thinking of the big events. I always look forward to Filbo. I always look forward to Sofa, and I always look forward to Rock al Parque. So I'd probably go with that little triumvirate. I think they really represent so much of what I love about living in Bogota. You know, Rock al Parque, I've talked about this before in other shows, but I love the fact that there's this enormous, great big festival in the middle of the city, completely free. There are big bands playing, people will always criticize lineup, and also the local bands, get to play in front of tens of thousands of people. They, put on proper support, and they really don't mess around. They kind of say, they make a big point of putting local bands right up underneath the headline acts. And I think that's such a wonderful thing. When I look at Filbo, again, very economically priced. It's opened up at a subsidy to all the school children in the city, so most of them go. Really tries to make an impact, on promoting reading. And then when we look at Sofa, you're looking at something that's so underground and really born out of a love for fantasy, nerd culture, geek culture, but absolutely something that burst up from being a couple of hundred people just 5 or 6 or 10 years ago to suddenly being an event that before the pandemic was pulling in, tens of thousands of visitors over a long weekend. Absolutely phenomenal. And that's all from the grassroots. That's all, built out of love and adoration. It's not corporate. It's just a very honest kind of thing, which epitomizes much of what I love about Bogota.
But that Sofa thing, is that then kind of something akin to a Comic-Con that they have in the United States?
Yeah. But there has also been a Comic-Con in Colombia, and you look at the two things, and they're chalk and cheese. The Comic-Con swanned in. It's got big name kind of partnerships, all very corporate. No sort of love behind anything. All very much by the numbers, ticking the box. Very much like, I love Qualifiers. I think it's a lovely venue. But like any of those venues, it can feel like you're in a really corporate airport-style space. And, an event like Filbo, an event like an event like Sofa is really good at making that space feel like it's, a village club sort of thing. Having that little intimate atmosphere of people who share your passions. the way that they get the, for example, Holland House, Argentina House, the way they're decked out, given over to their respective countries, things like that. Absolutely fantastic. The Macondo exhibition a couple of years ago, Feelables, things like that. Really, really wonderful. And then when you go to something like Comic Con, it just feels like you're in a massive shed with a bunch of advertisers shouting at you. Chalk and cheese.
Okay, right. Well, mentioning kind of chalk and cheese then, so you brought up like the Rock El Parque and the free event, and there might be certain people of a certain socioeconomic background here who might turn their noses up to the idea of Rock El Parque, but for those then, you have a stereo picnic. Would that be your chalk and cheese in terms of music events here?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And again, the same thing holds true. A stereo picnic is deliberately located, inaccessibly far away. It's hard to get to. It's got multiple sort of VIP levels for everything. There's little Instagram posing positions everywhere. Yada yada yada.
Okay. Just talking then about kind of cool venues, David Allen Simmons is on about that art festival that he was at 3 weeks ago, San Juan de Dios. That's that hospital down near Restrepo, is it? Recuarte, right? That neck of the woods, I think. I think that's where, if I'm correct. You'll correct me if I'm wrong, David Allen. But yeah, like kind of, I guess those more alternative events, obviously, if you're into the thing that you want to go to, would be rather cool. But David also mentions Radiohead. That kind of brought to my mind, like we've had big, since I've been here, and we've both been here about the same length of time, 10 years or whatever. Like there's been big international acts that have come to Bogota. Like it really has. I think they said like Venezuela, for obvious reasons, maybe 20 years ago was the international event, and now Colombia's taken over the international place for these big international acts.
Yeah.
Now Colombia has become the scene. Yeah.
I think
and we have Madonna.
Madonna was the one I think that kicked, that really kicked Bogota into action over renovating the what's now the Movie Star Arena. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, pre-pandemic, who knows how things are going to bounce back, but certainly pre-pandemic, you had some cracking lineups at a stereo picnic. You had big name artists coming to play. I mean, the likes of U2. I'm sure I don't need to tell you how huge U2 are. I know Bono is loved in Ireland.
Of course.
Worshipped as some sort of.
I met up with him when he was here. Yeah. We went for a few pints in the Barrio Tiendas. Nobody knew him there. He felt rather safe.
He probably would love Bogota. The streets literally have no name.
Yeah, they have a number, but that's not entirely true. A lot of the streets do actually have names, but nobody calls them by their names.
All right, if you just if the more you pick this apart, it's not going to hold up very far. I'll be honest.
Okay. But anyway, I was going to So let's see how it does. I
tell you what,
years to come.
If Bono comes back, you can take him down to the Hat Street in the centre. Just off Bolivar Square.
Yeah. I'm sure he'd get like a child at Christmas wandering around there. But I was going to say, well, we'll see how
Christmas. Oh no, sorry, that's the wrong one. Anyway, yeah.
But I know what was his line? No, it was Band-Aid. He did have a line in it, of course.
Oh yeah, no, I'm sure he did. But...
Is Bogota, just to pick up on David Allen's point here, is it a rocker city then? I mean,
yeah, of course,
a mad rocker. Yeah, okay.
No, of course it is. Yeah, it's absolutely a rock city. In fact, I'd almost go as far as say rocks. It's calling it a bit light. It's superb heavy metal city.
But by the way, have you been to the Movistar Arena? I mean, it looks pretty impressive. Okay, you can say Soul that used to be the Coliseo. Now, of course, like everything now, it's got a sponsorship and a big company behind it.
That's the way of the world, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, I can think of much more oppressively horrible things to be named after than a telephone communication company, so it's not too bad, is it?
Yeah. Have you been in it, though, since it was done up?
No, I haven't. No, I've not been to it. No.
Yeah,
to be fair, it wasn't open very long, was it, for everything got shut down again? David Allen, by the way, talking about San Juan de Dios, he was talking about Artbo. And again, Artbo, wonderful initiative. You know, they go out of their way. Yeah, okay, the central part is very poncy. You know, it's ex-presidents and people walking around with bodyguards and all that sort of thing. But it has to be said, Artbo is pretty open. It's cheap to go to, it's accessible. They go out of their way to have accessible art, or relatively accessible art, through schemes like the Feria de Millón. And again, this is something that I think Bogotá just in general does exceptionally well. I think Bogotá is very good at providing cheap or free, highly subsidized things. Whether that's classical music concerts, whether that's parts of FITBA, the Festival de Ibero-Americano Teatro, that often has, you know, outreach projects, especially for kids theatre. You know, and then of course we've got the Rock al Parque, Salsa al Parque, Colombia al Parque, Rap al Parque, Jazz al Parque. You know, all of that free. Wonderful.
Well, and actually mentioning free events, when I lived in the centre, and I guess maybe I just haven't unearthed them around this side of the city, but there wouldn't be as many of them this far north. But Teatro Gaetan, I think I'm correct, that's the one I'd like, Septima with 23 or 22, whatever. They used to have various free events. And I remember one Christmas, they had the Bogotá Philharmonic Orchestra doing various Christmas songs. I have to say it was fantastic. Like a really well put together event, and it was free, completely free, or maybe like it was totally a token payment, like 2,000 pesos or something like that. Now they also, well, you told me that this no longer is in existence; it's moved somewhere else. But a cinema, a kind of alternative or classic, cinema. I remember watching the Godfather trilogy there again. Just in between classes, they were running the Godfather season. But then they'd have like movies from all over the world there. But that's moved, you've told me. It's not there anymore.
Yeah, the Cinemateca Distrital has a new site and new pricing. But yeah, certainly it was fantastic. You know, back in the day, you used to go and watch art films for 2,000 pesos. Guys, that's not a joke. Admittedly, that's stretching back sort of 6 years, 7 years. But even I think when the original venue closed, it was right next door to the Gaetan. It was clocking in at I think less than 4,000 for a movie. Yeah,
well, so kind of going from symphony orchestras then to something perhaps a little bit more Philistine, but in Barrio Egipto they do the Festival de los Reyes every January. So mentioning San Juan de Dios and that area being a little bit peligroso, dangerous at night or whatever, like some people wouldn't want to go wandering around Barrio Egipto and Las Cruces. But a certain type of character tends to dominate in attendance at those festivals. But I have to say I enjoy them. You know, people would say it's tacky or whatever, perhaps. And there's a procession of the... Is it baby Jesus or whatever is in the... I'm usually not really paying attention to what's in the procession.
You're a Catholic.
Yeah, well, whatever's there, I forget. But like it's usually... Well, obviously we haven't had it we didn't have it last year because of the pandemic. But I usually try and get down there. Obviously the 6th of January around that time, Los Reyes Festival of the Three Kings. And it's just, again, you get a different side of the city, really, and a different feel, a completely different kind of festival. And there's usually like a concert, there'll be music or whatever. Popular. So you okay there, Ollie? You don't need to... hide your head or anything. No one's coming.
Yeah, that's not for me.
Yeah, and then kind of you could say linked to that, which I think usually takes place every October, is the Chicha festival in La Perseverancia. That's become quite popular, and in fairness, La Perseverancia, it seems to be losing its tag. You know, there used to be this joke about La Perseverancia that you walk up it, but you come down it in an ambulance. Especially the further up the hill you go. But there's actually a backpacker hostel now next to one of my old watering holes, which I would never imagine. So there's more kind of foreign faces doing the rounds. Plaza La Perseverancia has become quite to eat out and dine out the weekends or whatever. So it's kind of, well, it's not becoming upmarket, but it's becoming popular as a go-to neighborhood. And so that festival is there every October, as I said. If you're into chicha, are you a chicha man?
No. It's very difficult to drink. It's very difficult to drink out of a bowl with a moustache.
Yeah, well, you can get it. Yeah, you can get it in a glass if you want. Don't make that as an excuse not to drink it.
No, you can't get it in a glass. No, you can't get it in a glass. That's like, you know. No, I'm not a fan of that. No, you can't. No, if you go,
that's like having a Guinness out of a can, is it?
It's well, no, but I mean that's I'd say that's not the end of the world because at least it arrives in a can. I'm not a fan of that. Not a fan of that at all. It's like eating Vietnamese pho, but not sitting on a little three-legged stool. Ethan here, talking about the Perse. Ethan's talking about Baum, which to me spiritually always is in the Perseveranceria. But Baumfest was a huge, huge event. And of course, techno and electronica in general is huge in Bogota. What I was finding...
Yeah.
John?
But Bomb is the club, but it had a festival as well, or what? Yeah, okay, because I know the club. Yeah. Well, yeah. I vaguely remember being in that club back in the day, because I certainly never remember being it.
I'd also say Baum is one of those funny little locations that kind of straddled the line. So I always find it very interesting that Bogota essentially has two techno scenes. One that's very much, out in sort of Kennedy, Bosa et al., and is generally kind of strata 2, strata 3 kind of scene. Very much about house parties, very much about abandoned spaces, warehouses, that sort of thing. Really feels to me like what I think techno is. But then there's a completely different scene, which is in no way connected, which is, parties outside the city, up and over the hill, towards La Calera, parties in the Zona T, parties on rooftops, that sort of thing. And it, which is very much a kind of strata 5, strata 6 scene, and they kind of coexist in the same city, which I've always found odd. And Baum, I always thought, was one of those spaces that mixed those two scenes. You had people coming from both spaces and meeting in there, which was weird.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it comes as no surprise to most people that I'm not a big house man, but I've been dragged along to that nightclub venue back in the day. But it's still, has it moved location though, you're saying?
I think so. I mean, I'm an old man now and I have a long beard, so it's a while since I've been out clubbing with the youth. But yeah, I believe it did move.
Okay. One thing that we haven't mentioned yet though, and if you've Buenos Aires, even Rio de Janeiro, perhaps Santiago de Chile, going along to a game is kind of seen for some people as a must-do. It's not really sold in the hostels or thing. It certainly wasn't when I was backpacking it in La Candelaria to go, sign on the wall, go to El Campín to watch game of football. It's kind of seen as, a dangerous thing to do. But it can be an interesting spectacle to go to watch a Millonarios versus, well, if you can get a Clasico game, Millonarios Santa Fe. I've never been. as I said, I'm nominally, as people may know, a Millonarios fan. I've never gone to a Millos game. I've been to El Campín twice. On both occasions, Santa Fe Nacional. But it was, the stadium was far from packed, but it was, like, I enjoyed it. If you're into football, but even aside of that, I think if you're not into football, like, the energy. These guys are always singing, they're always chanting, no matter what the score is on the pitch. And the supporters tend to be always jumping up and down, especially the ultra supporters. You've been to El Campín, I think.
Yeah.
For a game.
But been there for the Sudamericana semi-finals. But I think it's been. I think, the thing is, it depends a lot on the match. I think certain matches are more eventful than others. Santa Fe Nacional, that's a big one. Bogotá versus Medellin, that's a big game to be there for. If, let's say, I don't know, Tigres are visiting, probably, Deportivo Pasto, it's probably not going to be the same atmosphere. I would warn people of that.
Yeah, you maybe want to be.
I've been to the National Stadium to watch Junior, who were, I can't even remember who Junior were playing, but you're in this enormous 60,000-seater stadium, and there must have been, barely 4,000 people there. I mean, there was so many empty seats, The nearest people to us must have been, 15 rows across.
Yeah. Okay. Just see, like I was going to say, you want to be a football fanatic really to go along to those games, really into your kind of technical side of the game and watching how the players are performing, not just kind of a passing interest. Now, David Allen Simmons is on about Bogotá Medellin, but who do you mean? Was it Santa Fe Nacional? Millonarios Nacional, or was it either one of the Bogotá clubs versus?
It could well have been Bogotá FC against Independiente Medellin.
Yes.
It's unlikely. I'll admit it's very, very unlikely.
And in a packed house, where would that be? Down in what's that one?
I realise I'm stretching credibility here, but yeah. Well, yeah, okay, yeah. If it was FC Bogotá, it would be Techo. There we go. Millonarios versus a Medellin team. Let's assume it's Independiente, because everyone likes Independiente compared to Nacional. Very much of the Manchester United of Colombia.
First football jersey I did buy here, a club jersey, was Nacional, simply because the colours, the kind of Irish Celtic-y kind of connection. But yeah, certainly I regret that decision.
Green is not a good colour for a club football team. That's a colour for a country, not for a club.
Okay.
Clubs should be blue or red. It's not complicated.
Oh, that's it. Nothing else. Blue or red. Okay.
There are two teams in Bogotá. One is blue, one is red. There are two teams in Buenos Aires. One is blue, one is red. There are two teams in Manchester. One is blue, one is red. Two teams in Bristol. One is blue, one is red. It's not that complicated.
How many are in London?
Chelsea are in blue. Arsenal are in red.
Tottenham in white. Anyway, look at this.
White's fine. That's a neutral colour. Yeah.
Okay.
But not green or yellow.
Quick one I want to mention, though, for anyone who may be working in the industry or can get a press pass, is Vitrina Turística, which one of my favourite events, I have to say, 3-day event, usually takes place at the end of February each year. This year they moved it, obviously because of the pandemic, but it's actually one of the events that hasn't been cancelled, because they did go ahead just before all the restrictions came in 2020, and then they had it at the end of this year. This year, obviously, because of various biosecurity protocols and stuff, it just wasn't the same. But usually, as a journo, as you well know, Ollie, we love to get free stuff. Well, who doesn't? But it used to be great. Like, each departamento would have their own stand, and then there would be the international section, everything related to tourism was a fantastic show, I have to say. Hopefully it comes back with a big bang next year as well. And if I'm still in the country, I'll make sure to get my press pass and go along. But it's a kind of for industry, or like those working it. So it's not open to the public per se, but it's a decent event in Corferias, I suppose, but say in El Campín in Corferias. Anyway, our producer is telling us to get the flock out of here. He's had enough. It's bedtime. So, guys, thanks for tuning in. Cheers for all your messages. David Allen Simmons, there may be a presenter role for you here. You can come along and we do a three-way thing for all your help. And we'll be back next week with our La Selección jerseys on, because it will be Brazil, Colombia. Hasta luego, guys. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.